All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at tropics. Today is Saturday, September 9th, 2023. This is your afternoon update where we are back once again talking about Hurricane Lee, centered today just off to the northeast of the Lesser Antilles, the British and U.S. Virgin Islands. Maximum sustained winds are about 115 miles an hour. We have a Category 3 hurricane on our hands today, down from its very much ballyhooed peak of Category 5 a few days ago. And off to its east, we have Tropical Storm Margot being battered by Lee's outflow. It's very rude. And that system is not going to impact the U.S. or anyone else. It's going to simply move up and away and not be a problem. Lee is hopefully going to do the same thing, but it's a little more complicated than that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the latest with Lee and some of the possible forecast tracks and scenarios for you. So this is the 5 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center. Lee is 150 mile an hour again, Category 3 hurricane, holding on to that. I think this might have been a 2 for a while, or even possibly a 1, but it's still a decently strong hurricane. And there's some evidence that there might be some 115 winds hiding in there, so we'll keep it for now. Movements to the west northwest at 10 miles per hour, and you can see this thing has moved confidently north of the Caribbean islands. No impacts here expected, even in the outermost rain bands of Lee will be staying away. For the next couple of days, Lee is just going to move along as a major hurricane. We do anticipate some re-strengthening. The Hurricane Center does bring Lee back to a Category 4 hurricane in about 48 hours. But you can see there's not a lot of forward momentum with this one. That movement at about 10 miles an hour is pretty much going to be the story with some kind of a north, just north of due west kind of track for a while, and then that more serious turn to the north isn't coming until Wednesday or Thursday. Satellite presentation of Lee today is not as impressive as it was a few days ago, obviously. It has some convective bursts, especially on the up shear flank of the eye, trying to move up and around that wind shear direction. But if you look over here, it looks like the hurricane got punched right in the side, and that's because it basically did. A good amount of low-level wind shear, some low to mid-level wind shear rather, set in. We switch over to the new fancy water vapor imagery on tropical tidbits. This is pretty easy to discern, and it actually is interesting because this isn't just an upper level wind shear. You can see where there's this big gap in the storm, you actually have some high clouds moving off the storm right here. These little frilly white clouds at the top kind of moving away. That's cirrus outflow. That means that the upper levels actually aren't being sheared that much, but the low to mid levels are, and that is more disruptive to the vortex because it's hitting the storm more head on right in the side. Like, it's hard to really describe it. Imagine like a ship was getting pushed by the wind, but the wind was only blowing at the very top of the ship, so it wouldn't move it that much. But if the wind hit the direct side of the ship, it would push it a lot more. And that's kind of what we're talking about with that wind shear. That just upper level shear will kind of skim the top off the storm. It'll aggravate it, it'll constrict outflow, but it won't really dramatically impact it. But that low to mid level shear, if you get it, can be pretty nasty. And then Lee is definitely taking a healthy hit of that. It's trying to intensify again. That infrared shot showing those storms wrapping up shear. I mean, it's pulsing. It's trying. It's trying to get itself going, and it looks like it will strengthen somewhat. But for now, the satellite still shows that shear being a problem, and it's something the storm will have to deal with. Uh, by some models indicate, just for another about 12 hours or so, then it abates and re-intensifies. Other models, like the European, think it's going to be sheared for longer than that. But the actual impact of that, not of much consequence. Again, Lee's off away from land, and whether it's Cat 1, Cat 3, or Cat 4, doesn't matter too much. Unless it were to dramatically weaken, like back to like a tropical storm, that could change the forecast. But as long as it keeps as a hurricane, it doesn't matter too much in the grand scheme. So you're probably wondering, where the hell is Lee going? You've probably read all these stupid things on TikTok and all these disreputable news outlets talking about Lee being like a Category 6 and hitting Florida and hitting whoever else. No. Let me start off with the Hurricane Center's track, because they can show you the map here. The confidence is fairly high that you're going to see that turn well before the Bahamas. This means that the Gulf of Mexico is not getting anything. You're fine. Florida, you're not getting anything. You're fine. Georgia, you're fine. South Carolina, you're fine. North Carolina, you're fine, but maybe I would like the Outer Banks might get skirted by a few rain bands. But largely 99.9% of the Southeast is fine. You are not going to see any direct impacts from Lee. You're not going to even see a rain band from Lee. The most you're going to see is swells and rip currents. You will have very high waves and very strong rip currents next week. You will know a major hurricane is offshore, but no direct impacts will be felt in those states. Who does have to pay some attention is basically the Mid-Atlantic and New England. I pretty much mean like New England, and of course Atlantic Canada by extension. I'll show you two different outcomes of what the models are thinking can happen with Lee. That track and turn does happen, on the Hurricane Center's map. Again, we can see that turn happens somewhere near Bermuda, and Lee probably passes off to the west of Bermuda. It's almost certain that's going to pass west of Bermuda. From there, there's two possible outcomes. Number one, the trough coming to pick up Lee, which on this map, this is valid for the middle of next week. There's a big trough coming down that's supposed to pick Lee up and turn it back out to sea. Okay. On one model and on most solutions, this trough is strong enough to push Lee away and keep it away from any major impacts. So the range would still push a lot of solutions into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, but most indications are this trough will be strong enough. The GFS illustrates this nice and well. The trough comes through. It's pretty potent. Lee sees a nice avenue right here. High pressure kind of stays further away. And the rotation between these forces Lee between them. And Lee moves up. And by the end of the week, Lee has moved into, again, Atlantic Canada, but has confidently and safely missed the eastern U.S. Maybe a few rain bands, definitely gusty winds, but no major impacts in this scenario. But that's not the only possible scenario. The European run this afternoon showed us a different one. This is valid Friday morning. As Lee moves in, you can see the trough a little bit faster on the European model and this high a little bit stronger. It constricts that window, that gate that Lee's got to go through is a lot smaller. And Lee tries to fit that gap anyway. But on this particular one of the European model, this high winds up being stronger. It ridges back in and it forces Lee back to the west. And this pushes the storm right into upper New England, right into New York and Massachusetts and Vermont and Maine as a pretty strong storm, probably category 1 or 2 hurricane, which would be a pretty nasty impact to the region. Now, that is one possible solution. Let me show you the ensembles to kind of explain this though, because someone will post this, someone will go on TikTok or some other disreputable person will go on and they'll say, "Oh my God, the new Euro, it goes into Massachusetts, everybody run for the hills." Let me show you this. Okay, this is the European ensembles here on the left. An ensemble is a computer model like the European models based data set, and the operational run, what I just showed you on the map, is the model's best guess for all the data it has at this time. Okay, but we also have an ensemble suite that runs parallel with the main run. So the main run is what I just showed you. The parallel run is the ensemble run, and that is about 50 different iterations of the model corrected with little changes in parameters. So it purposely toys with the atmosphere and it plays with parameters, it plays with starting settings, and it gives you a big range of possible outcomes. And it says, okay, if this little thing changes, what could that do? What could this do? It's like basically trying to test the butterfly effect 50 times, right? Sometimes you get a huge squish spider. That means, well, anything could still happen. If you've got some good agreement, then you go, okay, even if some things change, this is still what we can expect. As you can see, only 2 models of these like 50 that ran actually bring this into New England. The rest of them, one skirts Maine, and then the rest are all into Atlantic Canada. The black line you see here that I'm highlighting is the mean of all, it's the average of the ensembles. It is well offshore. GFS is well offshore. Same thing with GFS. You got a handful of members that skirt into New England. The rest of them turn away and move away. So what we can discern from this is that the prevailing thought is that Lee is going to stay offshore, even of New England. It very well could impact Eastern Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, but is unlikely to impact New England either. But there are still some possibilities where Lee could get too close for comfort, and if a few things break just the wrong way, New England could still be potentially talking about a storm. Now, also remember, we are about 7 days out from this happening. This is pretty much, if it were to happen, would happen about next Saturday or late Friday. Okay, I'm recording this Saturday afternoon. We're talking another week. The Hurricane Center's 5-day cone ends Thursday, and it's sitting in the Bahamas still. Okay, so just for your spatial understanding here, we are still like about 6-7 plus days away from any major impact. So we're still forecasting this well beyond what we should be anyway. But showing you that, again, the majority of the models, and this has been the song they've sang for a while now, is that Lee will move offshore and it will not be a threat to the U.S., period. But there are still a few outcomes where it could get a little too close, and we'll have to watch those. So you still should be prepared because it's hurricane season and you live on the East Coast, so you should be prepared regardless, but just keep an eye on it and try not to let the doomcasters on the other websites get to your head, because very likely this is going to be a storm for the fishes and it's not going to be a problem. So that hopefully explains the latest on Lee and makes some sense of the nonsense. And again, Margot, no threat. I can show you that cone, I guess, real quick. Yeah, no threat, no problem. And the Hurricane Center is not tracking anything else in the next 7 days. There's some, there's some stuff coming off Africa, but yeah, this is what we got right now. So once Lee gets out of the picture and turns away, most likely, probably not much else to talk about. So we'll be back sometime early next week to talk about the latest on YouTube here and Facebook. Obviously, all the regular updates daily and so on. And we will check in to see how the forecasts are looking. And if we got something to worry about, we'll talk about it. If we don't, we'll laugh at the fish storm and go about our business. So that's what we got for you guys tonight. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.